A very warm welcome from Department of Oral and Maxillofacial Pathology, Government Dental College and Hospital, Mumbai. Yes, the beginning of this decade 2021 has already entered into the COVID-19 pandemic, and the second wave, which started from January 2021, saw an upsurge of oral infections. COVID-19 associated mucormycosis cases rose not only in our state but also in our nation. And we, as dental professionals, know that mucormycosis basically involves the maxilla and is occurring because of the immune response, and 40% of the Indian population which is having diabetes is prone to mucormycosis. So here we have how the dental professionals can equip themselves to take up a call to curb this COVID-19 associated mucormycosis.
Hello everyone. Today's topic of presentation is COVID-19 associated mucormycosis call for dental professionals. We are discussing this topic under the heading of introduction and structure of fungi, then mucormycosis, introduction and pathogenesis, then lab diagnosis of the mucormycosis, and finally the preventive measures to be undertaken under the dental clinic. Coming to the introduction of the fungi, fungus is considered to be the member of the group of the eukaryotic organism that includes the microorganisms such as the microscopic unicellular yeast, microcellular multicellular molds, and also the mushroom, which are considered to be the multicellular filamentous structures responsible for formation of the large fruiting bodies. These fungi are responsible for causing the fungal infections, also referred to as mycotic infection in case of the animals, including humans. They are considered to be the habitat of any substrate, but more commonly they are found on the soil and the plant material as compared to the water or other substrate. Coming to the structure of the fungi, the main structure of the fungi includes the two main forms, that is vegetative form and the reproductive form. Vegetative form is composed of the long filamentous slender thin structure referred to as the hyphae, and reproductive form consists of the spores that are needed for the reproduction of the fungi. From the hyphae, there originate a specialized fungal hyphae at the stalk of the sporangium, which is referred to as the sporangiophore. On the sporangiophore, there is an enclosure unit, which is referred to as the sporangium, through which the spores are produced, which are responsible for the reproduction of the fungi. These fungal structure get anchored to the underlying substrate for the absorption of the nutrients by the help of the structure called as the rhizoid. The spores released from these fungal structure are responsible for causing the fungal infection into the susceptible individual. These spores are released into the air, and inhalation of these fungal spores, also the localized colonization of the skin by these fungal spore, either by the traumatic inoculation with the contaminated material or by the cut in the skin, can result into the persistent infection of the susceptible host. Based on the arrangement of the hyphae, the fungi are classified into the two types, that is septate hyphae and the coenocytic hyphae. Septate hyphae are those in which the hyphal structure is divided into the multiple cells with the help of the end walls that are called as the septa. These septa contains the hole in their structures. Through these holes, the nutrients are passed from the one hyphae to the another hyphae. Second one is the coenocytic hyphae. Coeno means common and cytic means cell. So coenocytic hyphae is the large single cell with the multiple nuclei without any hyphae. Next one is the cascade of the events that are responsible for causing the fungal infections of the oral cavity. The fungal infections of the oral cavity usually begins with the chemical and the biological reason that includes the food debris. On these food debris, there is a colonization of the microorganism, which may be either bacteria or the any fungal material. The colonization of the microorganisms on the food debris results in the formation of the biofilm. On these biofilm, there is a contamination and the attraction of the fungal elements, particularly the hyphae, which are responsible for causing the fungal patches, which leads to the fungal infections of the oral cavity. So, what are the colonizing and the predisposing factors that are responsible for the fungal infection in case of the susceptible individual? Colonizing factors are those factors which allows the entry of the pathogen into the susceptible host and evades the host response. These include the high intake of the carbohydrate diet, diabetes mellitus, smoking, alcohol consumption, loss of salivary function, malignancies like leukemia, lymphoma, immunosuppression caused by either chemotherapeutic drugs during the cancer treatment or during the HIV infection. Next one is the predisposing factor for the fungal infection. These are those factors which allows the individual prone to the infection. These includes the hormonal disorders, physiological disorders, poor oral hygiene, immunologic disorders, ill-fitting dentures, and empirical drug therapy. Now, how the fungal infection occurs in case of the susceptible host. So, what is the fungal response in case of the normal host and in case of the susceptible host? As we know, in case of the normal host, the blood vessels are lined by the endothelium, which are tightly attached to the each other. In case of the normal host, there is no endothelial gap in between the endothelium, and the blood contains the blood cells and the serum. The blood cells are formed by the different kinds of the WBCs and the RBCs and the defense cells of the immune system. The defense cells of the immune system includes the polymorphonuclear neutrophils and the monocytes and the macrophages. In case of the normal host, these defense cells, that is PMN, monocyte and macrophages, are responsible for the killing of the fungal hyphae through the release of the oxidative enzymes. That's why the fungal element doesn't get entered into the host, doesn't get entered into the tissue surface, and does not evade the any fungal response. Whereas in case of the susceptible host, there is an endothelial gap in between the endothelium. So through this endothelium gap, the fungal hyphae usually get entered into the blood vessels. In case of the susceptible host, the iron is present in the free form, while in case of the normal host, iron is considered to be the usually bound to the some binding proteins like lactoferrin or the transferrin. But in case of the susceptible host, iron is usually present in the free form. So the fungal hyphae, upon entering into the blood vessels, get attached to this iron molecule with the help of the siderophore, and results in the formation of the complex called as the iron rhizopheric complex. This iron rhizopheric complex is responsible for the dissemination into the systemic circulation and responsible for causing the fungal infection into the susceptible host. Now, what are the different kind of the fungal infection that are more commonly seen in case of the susceptible host? These are referred to as the opportunistic fungal infections. These are usually caused by the Cryptococcus species, Aspergillus species, or the zygomycetes, and most commonly in case of the intraoral region, the fungal infections are caused by the Candida species. Same way, the bacterial infections, which are more commonly seen in the susceptible host, are caused by the pneumococcal species, Klebsiella, E. coli, Staphylococcus pneumonias, or the tuberculosis infection. Now, the association of the mucormycosis in case of the COVID-19 pandemic. As we know, the nowadays the cases of the mucormycosis are rising day by day in case of the COVID-19 pandemic. This can be either due to the primary infection caused by the SARS-CoV virus, or either due to the treatment of the COVID infection that results in the immunosuppression of the individual, resulting in the formation of the mucormycosis. So, coming to the mucormycosis, it is also called as the phycomycosis, zygomycosis, or the entomophthalmycosis. The mucormycosis was first described by the Poltroff in case of the in 1885. It is considered to be the serious fungal infection, but somewhat rare, and it is caused by the group of the molds called as the mucormycetes. The perfect fungi are those fungi that divide by the sexual reproduction and result in the infection of the oral cavity. These includes the Aspergillus, Geotrichium, and the Mucorales species. As we have seen earlier, the fungal structure are usually resides on the soil or the plant material. The spores of these organisms are dispersed into the air from the decaying material and enters into the body system by the either nasal passages through the inhalation or enters into the sinuses by breathing the spores. And lastly, it can enters into the circulation through the cracks in the skin due to the wounds or the tears. Now, the modes of the spread and the clinical forms with the common pathologic processes. As we have seen now, the mucormycosis spores get entered into the susceptible host either through the inhalation, ingestion, or implantation, or through the inoculation by the contaminated needles. This results in the formation of the six different types of the mucormycosis, which includes the rhinoorbital or the rhinocerebral mucormycosis. The next one is the pulmonary mucormycosis, gastrointestinal, cutaneous, disseminated, or the other forms of the mucormycosis. All these process leads to the invasion of the fungal hyphae into the blood vessels through the mechanism of the angioinvasion, which spread through the hematogenous dissemination to the different systems, causing the organ involvement, leading to the tissue necrosis of the particular tissue. Coming to the clinical presentation of the most common form of the mucormycosis, that is the rhino-orbital cellular mucormycosis. If it involves the ocular region, it results in the formation of the periocular edema, periocular discoloration, orbital pain, ptosis, propoptosis, limited eye mobility, and the loss of vision. In case of the nasal involvement, it leads to the nasal mucosal erythema, inflammation, then nasal ulcers or the scar formation, then fetid and the purulo-sanguineous nasal discharge, nasal stuffness, and the epistaxis. It also results in the headache, altered sensorium, and the focal seizures. Rhino-orbital cerebral mucormycosis leads to the facial edema, facial discoloration, facial pain, facial palsy, and the paranasal sinus pain. In case of the oral and the perioral involvement, it leads to the formation of the unilateral grayish ulcer on the palate or the anterior maxilla, draining sinus or the post discharge, swelling of the alveolar bone, and the odontologia. These are considered to be the common symptoms of the rhino-orbital cerebral mucormycosis. Now, how it involves the orbital region mucormycosis in case of the rhino-orbital cerebral mucormycosis. It is usually considered to be the involvement through the third, fourth, and the sixth cranial nerve. The invasion of the fungal hyphae into these nerves leads to the paralysis of these third, fourth, and the sixth cranial nerves and accounts for the external and internal ophthalmoplegia. The involvement of the cranial nerve fifth and the seventh are results in the corneal anesthesia and the pupillary dilatation. Also, the loss of vision may occur in some cases. The disease is usually considered to be the unilateral in occurrence. Now, how the fungal endothelial interaction leads to the mucormycosis or the tissue necrosis in case of the particular tissue. First one is there is the invasion, angioinvasion, that is fungal hyphae get entry into the blood vessels. Then upon entering into the blood vessels, this leads to the formation of the thrombi. These thrombi formation causes the reduced blood vascular supply to the particular tissue. Reduced vascular supply lead to the tissue necrosis and the bone necrosis in the particular tissue. So mucorals has the characteristic that it exhibits a distinctive host pathogen interaction compared to the other fungi, facilitating the host evasion and the disease progression. Now, how the COVID-19, in case of the COVID-19 pandemic, the mucormycosis cases are rising. It occurs through the two different mechanisms, either through the primary infection in case of the COVID infection, or it can be either due to the treatment option that has been undertaken for the COVID-19. So in case of the COVID infection, that there can be the microvascular coagulation. That means the thrombi can be the formed in the blood vessel. Then there can be the ciliary dysfunction or the cytokine storm. So microvascular coagulation and the ciliary dysfunction leads to the acute respiratory distress syndrome and the multi-organ failure, while the cytokine storm results in the altered immune response. Both of these scenario leads to the depletion of the immunity or the immunity exhaustion. So the immune compromised state is achieved in case of the susceptible individual, and that leads to the susceptibility to the secondary infection, causing the mucor hyphae to cause the infection in case of the susceptible individual, resulting into the mucormycosis of the tissue. Then coming to the treatment option of the COVID-19, that includes either the anti-interleukin 6 directed strategies, or second one is the corticosteroid or the remdesivir treatment, which are commonly given in the treatment of the COVID virus. So both these treatment option leads to the reduction in the cell mediated immunity. So reduction in the immunity leads to the immunocompromised state of the individual, which are prone to the secondary infection and leads to the causation of the mucormycosis. Also, the invasive procedures undertaken during the hospitalization and the poor nursing ratios leads to the break in the aseptic condition, and that causes the condition which are favorable for the fungal growth, which ultimately leads to the formation of the mucormycosis. Now, how being the dentist point of view, mucormycosis, how it involves the orofacial region. First one is the nasal cavity. The nose is considered to be the most common site of the initiation of this form of the disease and is associated with the direct extension to the paranasal sinuses, orbit, or the cranial cavity. On examination, fetid purulosanguinous exudate is commonly seen on the nasal mucosa. The nasal terminates become necrotic and dark in appearance. Next one is the why the maxilla is more commonly affected. The spores of the fungal structure get entered into the nasal cavity through the inhalation. Through the nose, they get direct access to the nasal and the paranasal sinuses, through which through the vascular invasion, it involves the maxilla and leads to the osteonecrosis of the maxillary bone. Next one is the intraoral involvement. Intraorally, it manifests usually as a unilateral grayish necrotic area, most commonly in the posterior region of the palate, involving the distribution of the spinopalatine artery, particularly the anterior palatine branch. It can also occur in case of the anterior maxilla through the involvement of the nasopalatine artery. Odontalgia and the extraction of the maxillary teeth have been associated with the onset of the acute symptoms. But whether the toothache is considered to be the inciting cause or the result of the sinus disease is yet unclear. Now, the COVID-19 and the defects in odontogenesis. There is a still debate going on whether there is a biological basis for the increased risk of dental anomalies in case of the COVID-19 infection. Whether the vertical transmission of the SARS-CoV-2 virus and the possible congenital alterations are there or not, it is still a dilemma. If in such cases, it can result in the possible dental alteration associated with this scenario includes hypodontia, microdontia, enamel hypoplasia, enamel hypomineralization, impacted teeth, shovel-shaped teeth, dense invaginatus, and dense evaginatus. Secondly, the other consequences of the oral manifestation that can be either due to the direct infection of the COVID virus or can be either due to the secondary manifestation of the COVID-19. This includes the xerostomia, oral ulcer, petechiae, and the reddish macules mainly on the palate, desquamative gingivitis, and the blisters on the lower lip and the buccal mucosa. Now the association of the diabetes and the mucormycosis. As we have seen earlier, upon entering into the blood vessel of the susceptible host, fungal hyphae used to get bind to the free iron present in the blood. So it leads to the formation of the iron rhizosphere complex, which is then taken up by the fungus for its vital functions. From this iron rhizosphere complex, it leads to the involvement of the different organ system and causes the mucormycosis. The patients having the diabetic ketoacidosis has the elevated serum iron level because of the acidic pH of the serum that causes the dissociation of the free iron from the sequestering proteins. So as the free iron has been increased in the circulation, it leads to the formation of the more iron rhizosphere complex and resulting into the dissemination of the fungal structure. So which are the risk factors that are involved in the mucormycosis? The risk factor involved for the fungal infection and mucormycosis are more or less same. These include the diabetes mellitus, lymphomas, leukemia, and the AIDS, hematopoietic stem cell transplant, solid organ transplant recipients, hematological malignancies, renal failure, desferoxamine therapy, autoimmune disorder, burns, trauma, surgical wounds, and the low birth weight. And the predisposing factors include the prolonged use of the corticosteroid, neutropenia, and the malnutrition. All these factors lead to the suppression of the immunity in case of the susceptible host, and that is responsible for the invading the pathogen into the circulation. So, why there is a need for the diagnosis of the mucormycosis cases? So, this topic will be discussed by my colleague, Dr. Salma.
So now coming to the need for early diagnosis of mucormycosis. So the delayed treatment of invasive mucormycosis is an independent predictor of poor outcome in multivariate analysis. So a delay of even 6 days in initiating the treatment will double up the 30-day mortality from 35% to 66%. Now, what are the benefits of early diagnosis? That will prevent angio invasion, it will prevent direct tissue injury, it will prevent the extension into critical sites like eyes, brain, great vessels, and the prevention, it will also prevent the progression to dissemination. There will be reduced need for extent of surgical resection, disfiguring, and suffering. And the outcome will be improved and the survival rate will increase. Coming to the diagnosis, the analyzing the patient's medical history is of utmost importance, and the meticulous physical examination for any signs of fungal infection in the skin, eyes, and the nasal passages. So very first thing what we'll do is obtain a biopsy from the reddened and the distended region. So this helps to a fair extent to determine if the pathogen responsible for infection in the patient is indeed the mucormycete fungus or some other yeast infection like candidiasis. And additional imaging scans can be done such as CT scan and MRI of the lungs, the GI tracts, kidneys, that will obtain as a visual images of any possible damage to internal tissues in these vicinities. Now we come to the lab investigations of mucormycosis. A combination of clinical observation and laboratory investigations will include specimen collection and transport. Microscopic examination will include the wet mount, staining, and histopathology. We can do fungal culture and non-culture methods, which includes the serological methods, antigen detection, antibody detection, test for detection of metabolites, test for detection of cell-mediated immunity, recent advances, which includes molecular methods and the spectroscopy. Specimen collection and transport. The specimens which are used for diagnosis are pus. By aspiration, we can get this. And from the tissue scrapings, from the sputum and the saliva. And the methods for specimen collection are by swab or paper points and the smear. So what are the guidelines for specimen collection? The tissue specimen scrapings should be placed in a sterile saline and not in formalin. Collect from the area most likely infected, use sterile technique, keep the specimen moist, label the container properly, transport right away and process right away. Now the wet smears, unstained preparation with KOH. Now, what is the principle? The potassium hydroxide is a strong alkali. It softens, digests, and clears the tissue debris so that the fungal elements, yeast cells, yeast the cells with pseudohyphae, budding hyphae, granules, conidia, etc., can be readily distinguished from. So there are two types. One is the slide QH and the tube QH. In slide KOH, we place the specimen on a clean glass slide. We put a 1 drop of 10% KOH on it and place a cover slip on it. And we heat the slide gently over the flame and examine it after 10 to 15 minutes. And in tube KOH, it is done mainly for biopsy specimens which take longer time for dissolution. The specimen is placed in a tube in 10% KOH and incubated overnight at 37 degrees Celsius and examined. So what we see under the slide, under KOH wet mount, we see that characteristic broad non-septate ribbon-like hyphae with wide angle or right angle branching at irregular intervals. And on culture examination, the specimens collected can be cultured in Seborrhoe's dextrous agar with appropriate antibiotics and incubated at 25 to 37 degrees Celsius. And what do we see is the appearance of cream colored colonies after 3 to 4 days of incubation, and sometimes colonies may develop overnight also.
So coming to the histopathology of mucormycosis. Histopathology is considered to be the gold standard for giving the diagnosis of mucormycosis. As you all know that KOH mount can be used to give rapid diagnosis of fungal infection, but histopathology is considered to be the gold standard. So on a histopathological slide, mucor colonies are going to appear as a non-septate hyphae with a right angle branching. Okay, and these mucor colonies are going to be seen very close to the blood vessels because it has a property of angioinvasion. Okay, so we are going to see aseptate ribbon-like hyaline hyphae on a histopathological slide with a right angle branching. When we are giving the diagnosis of mucormycosis, various differential diagnosis has to be kept in mind. Candidiasis is the most common fungal infection that is encountered in oral cavity. So on a histopathological slide, we are going to see a pseudo hyphae like structure. Okay, so pseudo hyphae is basically the yeast cells, okay, the buds which are 2 to 4 in microns aligned in a chain like fashion, giving the appearance of hyphae, but they are pseudo hyphae. Okay, can be seen. When we think about giving the diagnosis of aspergillosis, we should be clearly able to see the hyphae which are septate, as well as these hyphae should be at a acute angle branching. Okay, then only aspergillosis can be given in the diagnosis. Unlike mucor colonies, which are non-septate hyphae at a right angle branching. Okay, so a diagnostic dilemma to give the diagnosis of fungal exist because they are very difficult to observe on a wet mount. Secondly, the tissue which we have received, if it is handled very aggressively, can destroy the fungal architecture, again causing difficulty in giving diagnosis. Thirdly, when we suspect a patient to be of a fungal infection clinically, and we empirically start with antifungal therapy, again these colonies will not be seen clearly when we see the biopsy, because already the antifungal therapy has been started and later on the biopsy has been taken. Okay, so one request is to first 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 get a final a proper diagnosis of fungal infection by taking a biopsy, and later on only to start with antifungal therapy. Do not start any empirical antifungal therapy. Okay, now sometimes it becomes difficult to observe these mucor colonies on a HNE slide. In those cases we use various special stains. Okay, the most common stains which are used are GMS and PAS stain. On a GMS stain, these fungal colonies are going to appear as black colored hyphae against a pale blue green background. Okay, whereas on a PAS stain, since the hyphal structure are a rich source of glycogen, so they will take up this PAS stain and they will be stained magenta in color. Okay, less commonly we are going to use a calcofluor white stain or a lactophenol cotton blue. Because calcofluor white is a not very cost effective, it is a quite expensive stain. Also polarized microscopy is used to see these fungal colonies, so not commonly used. When we use this stain, we are going to see a fluoresced bright blue white colonies against a dark background, mainly used for academic purpose. On a lactophenol cotton blue, we are going to see blue color colonies. Okay, few recent advances that are used for giving the diagnosis of mucormycosis or any fungal infections are PCR studies, fish studies like fluorescent in situ hybridization, internal transcribed spacer sequence, restriction fragment length polymerization. Again, these are very expensive, so not commonly used in our day-to-day practice. Matrix assisted laser desorption ionization, time of light can also be used for giving the diagnosis. So now we as dentists, how we are going to prevent these fungal infection in patients will be discussed by my colleague Dr. Nivedita in the following slides.
As there's a saying, prevention is better than cure. We as dental practitioners have to take a lot of measures when it comes to this COVID-19 pandemic. There are a few general measures which includes vigilant monitoring of diabetes status, oxygen saturation level, and heart rate. There used to be a judicious use of systemic steroids and immunomodulants and immunosuppression, and a lot of antiseptic precautions has to be taken as well during dental treatment while injecting using needles, and whenever establishing an intravenous route, when administering oxygen, and when using clean distilled water in humidifiers. The clinical measures which has to be followed includes a thorough and regular examination of the orofacial regions of the patient, and in case of a non-emergency procedure in a patient who was recently infected with COVID-19, it is better to defer the treatment by few weeks, and certain investigations are also important. In case of suspected individuals, a deep nasal swab for fungal culture is advised. CT scan, complete blood count, and nasal endoscopy is also advised. And biopsy is also important. In case of culturing, the biopsy specimen is stored in saline, and in case of histopathology, it is stored in formalin. A prophylactic medication has to be advised for the patient, which includes asking the patient to gargle with betadine, chlorhexidine, and any other mouthwash twice a day, and use of nasal saline spray twice a day, and vitamin supplements like vitamin A, vitamin E, and vitamin B complex, and the use of oral antifungals and application of intranasal amphotericin B for eye risk patient. And it is important for patient counseling as well, which includes counseling the patient for hygiene, diet, and medical consideration. The patient has to be advised to maintain a proper personal and environmental hygiene, and it is better to avoid dusty and waterlogged places. It is recommended to use N95 mask and discard the disposable mask regularly. It is important to make sure that the cloth masks are sweat free and are washed regularly and thoroughly. The dietary recommendation includes a diet with adequate protein and vitamin content with low carbohydrate and fat content. The patient should be encouraged to avoid the use of tobacco and alcohol consumption. Medical counseling is important for the patient as well. The patient should be advised to consult the dentist in case of any queries without any hesitation, and report to the physician or dental practitioner in case of any symptom or difficulty like tooth mobility or foul smell, and to avoid certain medications without any prescription from a physician. In a nutshell, let's see what are the do's and don'ts when it comes to the role of dental practitioners. The do's include control of hyperglycemia, monitor blood glucose level, use steroid judicially, use clear sterile water for humidifiers, and use antibiotics or antifungals judicially. Coming to the don'ts, we shouldn't miss any warning signs or symptoms. We shouldn't consider all cases of blocked nose as cases of bacterial sinusitis, especially in cases of immunosuppression and or COVID patients on immunomodulators. And we should not hesitate in seeking aggressive investigation as appropriate for detecting fungal etiology. And we shouldn't lose crucial time to initiate the treatment for mucormycosis. IDA has recommended certain guidelines to minimize the chances of exposure, which includes placing a sign at the entrance of our dental clinic, which instructs the patient to defer the treatment and reschedule the appointment if they have any signs of any respiratory disease. And the patients who have any recent travel history or any contact with the people who have turned positive in recent times have to inform the dentist and has to reschedule the appointment and accordingly. And it is important to take a detailed travel history and health history. A regular temperature reading has to be a part of the routine assessment of patients before performing any procedure, and the contact details and the address of the patient should be maintained. It is important to install physical barriers at the reception area to limit close contact with potentially infectious patients. It is important to make sure that the dentist is wearing PPE during all the important procedures, and use of rubber dam is also essential to decrease the possible exposure to infectious agents. Use of high-speed evacuation for dental procedure, which produces aerosol, is highly recommended, and it is important to autoclave the hand pieces after each patient. And it is important to advise a patient with to rinse with 1% hydrogen peroxide solution before each appointment, and clean and disinfect the public areas frequently, including door handles, showers, and bathroom. It is important to post visual alert icons at the entrance and the strategic areas, like the waiting area, elevators, or cafeterias, which provides instruction to the patient regarding personal hygiene measures like hand hygiene, respiratory hygiene, and cough etiquette. Instructions should be that, like how to use the tissues to cover the nose when sneezing, or cover the mouth during coughing, to dispose the tissues and the contaminated items in waste area, and how and when to perform hand hygiene. It is important to provide supplies for respiratory hygiene and cough etiquette, including alcohol-based hand rub with 60 to 95% alcohol, tissues, and no-touch receptacles for disposal at the entrances, waiting room, and patient check-in. uh, Risk assessment is very critical. Dental personnel should be alert and identify patients with acute respiratory illness when they arrive, and they should give them disposable surgical face masks to wear and isolate them in a single patient room. Facial protection is of utmost importance. One should avoid touching the eyes, nose, and mouth with unwashed hands. It is important to wear a surgical mask and have a proper eye protection by wearing face shield or goggles to protect the mucous membrane of the eyes, nose, mouth during activities that are likely to generate splashes of spray of blood, body fluid, secretion, and excretion. Uh, uh, Dentists can also wear gown to protect the skin and prevent soiling of the clothing during activities that are likely to generate splashes or sprays of blood, body fluid, secretion, or excretion. It is important to remove the soil gown as soon as the procedure is over and perform appropriate and proper hand hygiene procedure. Uh, it is important to handle, transport, and process used linen in a manner which prevents skin and mucous membrane exposure and contamination of clothing. It avoids the transfer of pathogens to other patients and or the environment. Coming to hand hygiene, it is important to wash the hand with soap and water for at least 20 seconds after contact with patient, or if there is no soap and water, you can use a hand sanitizer with at least 60% alcohol content. Uh, and it should be done before and after any patient contact and in between patients. Whether you use gloves or not, it is important to follow a proper hand hygiene procedure. Uh, and it is important to wash your hands after your gloves are removed and before handling any invasive device. After touching blood, body fluid, secretion, excretion, non-intact skin, and contaminated items, it is important to follow a proper hand hygiene procedure. During patient care, when moving from a contaminated area to a clean body site of the patient, hand hygiene has to be performed, and after contact with inanimate objects in the immediate vicinity of the patient, it is important to follow a proper hand hygiene procedure. Coming to respiratory hygiene and cough etiquette, patients should be advised to close their nose and mouth during coughing or sneezing. Uh, it is important to provide them tissues and no-touch receptacles to throw away the used tissues and offering face masks to patients who are coughing. It is important to dispose of used tissues and masks and perform hand hygiene after contact with respiratory secretion. It is better if the dental personnel use N95 respirators or respirators that offer a high level of protection instead of face mask when performing or present for an aerosol generating procedure. One of the most important consideration is waste disposal. It is important to ensure safe waste management. It is also important to treat waste contaminated with blood, body fluid, secretion, and excretion as clinical waste in accordance with the local regulation. Human tissues and laboratory waste that is directly associated with the specimen processing should also be treated as clinical waste, and they should be discarded properly according to the guidelines. Uh, in a nutshell, in this session, we have discussed about introduction and structure of fungi, cascade of events for fungal infections of the oral cavity with predisposing factors, normal host versus susceptible host response in fungal infection, and an outline about the opportunistic infection, rising incidence of mucormycosis in COVID-19 pandemic. We have also learned about mucormycosis, the mode of spread and clinical forms, clinical symptoms, and its pathogenesis. We have also seen about the relationship between the COVID-19 and mucormycosis and increasing rise of mucormycosis in COVID-19. We have seen about COVID-19 pandemic and orofacial involvement, an association of diabetes with mucormycosis, laboratory investigation, and role of dentists in preventing and managing orofacial and dental infections in COVID-19 pandemic. Now, Dr. Manisha ma'am will be concluding this session.
So, till now, we have seen various aspects of COVID associated with mucormycosis under different headings like introduction and structure of fungi, then cascade of events for fungal infection of oral cavity with predisposing factors, normal host versus susceptible host response in fungal infection, opportunistic infection, then rising incidence of mucormycosis in COVID-19 pandemic. Mucormycosis we have seen under various headings, then COVID-19 and mucormycosis, and COVID-19 pandemic and orofacial involvement, particularly insisting on the dental point of view. Then also we have seen association of diabetes and mucormycosis, and then various investigation to rule out the or to do the diagnosis of mucormycosis, and this will help us to uh, insist the role of dentist in prevention and management of orofacial and dental infection in COVID-19 pandemic. So till now we have seen various aspects associated with mucormycosis. Why it is important? As this mucormycosis developing in post-COVID-19 patient breaks the back of the patient's family that is barely recovering from treacherous viral infection. And this scenario is nothing short of recovery from the frying pan and into the fire. So over here, this presentation aims to highlight that the important role of dentist, which will lead in early diagnosis of occurrence of this mucormycosis in post-COVID patient, where follow-up is important, and thus early diagnosis will lead to improved prognosis. So, thank you all for patient listening.